You're listening to the No Schedule Man podcast with Kevin Bulmer, exploring real stories and lessons learned with a variety of special guests. To learn more about Kevin and to access other episodes of the podcast, please visit noscheduleman.com and connect and contribute at No Schedule Man on Twitter or Instagram and on Facebook, YouTube, and SoundCloud, all /No Schedule Man. Thanks for listening and enjoy the No Schedule Man podcast.
I've been known to struggle with reality, not that it is any real mystery.
The question today is, how do you go from being a teenage weekend laborer to one of the more successful entrepreneurial stories in the country and a positive example of both personal and professional growth to small business owners and people all around the world? Well, the answer, according to Jim Gilbert, is to do the work, take action, always be learning, and always be huggable. I'm Kevin Bulmer. It's great to have you here, and today we're exploring the journey of Jim Gilbert. Since the late 1970s, Jim has been earning a reputation as Canada's Huggable car dealer. Along with his wife Donna, Jim has built a family-run business that's a shining example of what it means to never be afraid of standing in your own truth and believing in the magic of possibilities. Now, if you were to visit Jim Gilbert's Wheels and Deals in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada, you'd find a business, and indeed a business that sells pre-owned vehicles, used cars, a business that is a reflection of the values and the enormous hearts of the people who created and nurture it. Sitting on what they call 6 acres of fabulous, Jim Gilbert's Wheels and Deals is much, much more than a vehicle dealership. It's a destination. It's Canada's Huggable car dealer. Now, you'll not only find wall-to-wall teddy bears, a carousel, free popcorn, and other Disney-like touches at Wheels and Deals, but you'll also encounter a family atmosphere that lives and breathes the values of showing why it's important to lift spirits and touch hearts each and every day, even if it's just with a simple smile and a hug. Now, of course, the irony here is that the magic sauce is not in some catchy slogan, marketing gimmick, or promotional trick. It's all in the consistent implementation of something that's available to every single one of us. Ageless principles of kindness, appreciation, and integrity. In other words, in an age where common courtesy doesn't seem to be quite so common, Jim and Donna stand out, and they have built a well-deserved reputation over time for being exactly what they say they are. Huggable. You'll hear that right away when Jim begins telling his story. It's remarkable, a great tale, it's enjoyable, and, well, huggable, and you're going to absolutely love it. Here are a few of the key things that I took from my time with Jim. Number 1, working weekends and learning from the customer. He starts right off telling stories about how he was willing to work way back when he was in his teens, at times when others weren't, and how that opened up doors for him. Another story that really jumped out at me was the time when he was responsible for selling boats, among other things. Didn't know much about boats, but he talked about how he just let the customers educate him, and how he sold more boats than anybody by listening, basically, to what people wanted, and he learned by listening. And it's a really powerful lesson, working weekends and learning from the customer. Number 2, shoot the gun, ride the bullet. We can classify this more simply as just taking action. Jim's always been somebody to just go and figure it out. Gets an idea and chases the idea. Doesn't worry so much about the how. Just gets into the doing and then adjusting as he goes. And he's adjusted his way up into be literally an example to people all over the world. As you'll hear him describe, our mutual friend Gare Maxwell uses the example of Jim Gilbert's Wheels and Deals and being Canada's Huggable car dealer as a positive example in his keynote speaking engagements and representing the branding highway to executives literally in places all over the world. And Jim has done that by riding each bullet as it's come along. Number 3, Jim did what everybody else did until he didn't. In other words, he was stuck in the same rut as everyone else until he realized that there was a different way. So in the used car business, he describes a time in his life where he was just like everybody else. He was just doing what everybody else did until he observed somebody new that came to town and had blown the model up and thought that he could do more. And Jim was smart, watched what he was doing, watched what he was not doing, and eventually he surpassed that other person. He did the same thing with his own personal growth. He tells a story about somebody coming by the dealership trying to sell an Amway thing or something like that, but leaving some Zig Ziglar tapes. Listen for what Jim has to say about that, what he chose to do, and how he has continued to invest in himself since that time, and what that transformation has meant, both in his personal and his professional life. Now, this kind of thing can only come from the curiosity of a growth mindset. He did what everybody else did until he didn't anymore. And that's something that I think that you and I are both going to have to keep an eye out for, these subconscious ceilings that we set when we're just watching what everybody else does. Just take note of who you're watching and what those ceilings are. You're going to absolutely love listening to Jim. Here's the conversation exploring the journey of Jim Gilbert, Canada's Huggable car dealer, on the No Schedule Man podcast. Jim, what was your initial introduction into the automotive business?
Actually, I started when I was 19 years old, selling brand new Honda cars. I was fortunate enough to get on with the Honda dealer, and I loved every minute of it.
How did that materialize?
Well, that was pretty neat, actually, and it was probably one of the first lessons I ever learned. I just got out of high school, and a friend of mine got me a summer job at the owner's house of the Honda store in Fredericton, New Brunswick. He was building a house, and he was just looking for laborers. So I went down, and Randy got me my job as a laborer. So, and I was the third laborer on the project. So there was the foreman's son, there was the service manager of the Honda dealership son, that was my friend, and then there was me. So I'm number 3 in the pecking order. And on the first week I was there on Friday, Gerald Sullivan, the owner, he came down. He wanted to know if somebody would work on the weekend and help him do a few things around his new house, like it was just in the midst of being built. And the foreman's son, he said he doesn't work weekends. And my friend Randy, whose father was a service manager at the Honda store for Gerald, he didn't work weekends. And I looked at Gerald and I said, yeah, I work weekends. So I worked the next day. I remember washing windows with vinegar and stuff. It wasn't hard work. When you're working with an owner, sometimes it's not hard work. So then the next week, the same thing occurred. It was the same scenario. Gerald come down. I need some help over the weekend. Is anybody going to work? And I kept my mouth shut because I'm the third guy in the pecking order. But the foreman's son, he doesn't work weekend. My friend Randy, that was service manager's son, he doesn't work weekends. And I said, I work weekends. So I worked again the next weekend. So then on the third weekend, the same thing happened. Gerald come down, who wants to work tomorrow? And actually the third weekend, Gerald just come down and said, Jim, we're going to do this and this tomorrow. Are you in? I said, sure. So I basically worked every Saturday with this guy that owned the Honda dealership in Fredericton, New Brunswick. He had Skidoos and Hondas and boats. He had quite a big place. So that summer I worked probably a lot of Saturdays and a few evenings at his house. And he didn't even ask the other guys if they wanted any extra hours or anything. He would just come to me and say, we're going to do this and that. And I was only 19. I didn't care. I could work weekends, nights. It didn't bother me then. And what was really, really, really good about it is at the end of the summer, we was all finished our job because it was just a summer job. And we all knew we was done the last week of August. There's no issues there. So we come down to give everybody their, you can call it their pink slips, but we weren't really getting fired because we was done anyway. So he gave Randy his pink slip and his vacation pay and said thank you. And he gave the other guy his pink slip and vacation pay and said thank you. And he looked at me and he said, Monday morning, be at the Honda dealership. You're going to start working for me, selling cars and boats and snowmobiles and motorcycles, and let's go. So I showed up 8 o'clock Monday morning, and I was a salesman, and I loved it ever since. So I learned a good lesson. When somebody asks you to do something, say yes.
You're recalling that with it sounds like a lot of detail and fond recollections. I'm wondering, it sounds to me, Jim, that whole episode is something that you've reflected back on and maybe even shared with some people that may have come and worked for you in the time since as being a really important lesson. Am I right?
Well, it is. I figure in my lessons of life, it's probably, and lessons of life, and that's once you turn 19, 20, 21 or whatever, and you got to move on in life. It was probably one of my most important lessons that, if you're willing to do the extra, go the extra, smile and say yes when you're asked, good things happen at the other end of it, because it started me off on a very good life.
Take me back, if you would, Jim, a little bit before that. What were you like as a kid and getting into your teens, the kind of things that interest you and that you thought might be up ahead of you as you got a little older?
Well, really, when I was in my teens, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I had no idea. I worked all my way through high school. Even when I was in high school, I worked I think I was 35 hours a week, 5 nights a week, 7 hours a night, Kentucky Fried Chicken, making money. So I always wanted stuff. My parents really never had the money, to buy me cars and motorcycles and all that stuff. So anything I had to work for. Like I started working really when I was 13 or 14, when your parents were allowed. Back then they could sign a form saying you could work. So I packed groceries when I was 13, 14, 15 at a place in St. John called Quick Pick and bought my first motorcycle myself. So then I moved from St. John, New Brunswick to Fredericton, New Brunswick, when my father changed jobs. And it was the same thing. I had I went all the way through high school. Every summer I had to go out and get a job. And if I wanted something, I went to work for it. And as for what I was going to do later on in life, I went through high school. I had no plans. I really just had no idea what I wanted to do at all.
I can tell by how you answered that last question, you clearly like motorcycles.
Oh, I like toys. I like motorcycles and snowmobiles and boats and fast-moving things. I enjoyed it. I worked hard for what I got.
Where do you think that the love of that stuff came from?
Well, when I grew up I moved to St. John, New Brunswick. I was about 10 years old, and St. John at the time was more a blue-collar town, and all my friends going to school, even when they was like grade 7, 8, and 9, we all knew how to drive something. It was just what they did. Like 12, 14 years old, these guys all had their motorcycles and their dirt bikes and their little wheel. Like, I guess we didn't have wheelers then, but they all had little mopeds, like whatever it took to get around. Like we used to be driving down roads, 13 years old, and then you'd go out in the country. If you went out like to some friend's house in the country, you'd drive a car or a tractor around, and just everybody that I would say my friends of that era, that age, were just into their cars and their trucks. And, I know that sounds young, but these guys were 15, 16 years old building Chevelles and everything. So we used to drive back then on the roads at 15, no license, no insurance, no nothing. And luckily we're still here.
Bit of a different time, huh?
It's a different time. You could do it back then. I bought my first Yamaha 125 street motorcycle. I'm 15 years old, going to high school, or going to start in high school, I guess. And, nobody thought nothing of it.
Well, it was probably safer because you weren't all texting each other while you were driving along.
We had no texts. Yeah, we had no text, no phone, no nothing.
So
it was a lot of fun those years. And fortunately, when I was in St. John those years, everybody I knew, their parents were working parents too. And so everybody and my friends, whatever, a lot of us worked at Quick Pick together. Whatever we wanted, we worked for. Nobody gave us nothing. Even we're 14 years old, we're packing groceries and taking groceries out to cars, and we want it was a good life.
That gives me a little bit more perspective about why that initial job at the Honda dealership meant so much to you. So given what you just shared with me, Jim, being 19 years old and landing as a salesperson at a dealership where you've got all manner of toys, and up in New Brunswick, that's a good solid 4-season place to live. So, motorcycles to snowmobiles and everything in between. Now I've got a bit clearer idea why you might have been so excited to be there. What was it like for you in the initial stages of that, learning how to sell and represent that stuff?
Well, fortunately, we're talking back in 1972, 74, 75. We had it like, I got Honda still stamped on my forehead. We had a good product. We had Honda cars. They just come to Canada 2 or 3 years earlier. We had Honda motorcycles. We had Skidoos, and we had Johnson Motors, and I can't remember the boat line then, but in my mind, we had a good product. It was a well-established place. And back those years, there wasn't that many people selling against you or that many businesses. Like today, if you open up a business, it seems in 30 days, 20 businesses, exact same, open up. But back then, you was the only guy that had Honda cars for sale. You was the only guy that had Honda motorcycles. And so people did come to you. And the owner was good to me, and everybody around me good to me. But I tell you, he taught me something. Like he was a good person. Gerald Sullivan was he was a good person. But if you didn't sell, you was gone. Even he might like you, but if you didn't make the cash register ring, there was no tomorrow. And fortunately, I understood that very, very, very fast. I was only as good as my last sale, and that's what I was hired to do, and that's what I was paid to do. And we got a lot of leeway, like you said here. We could drive the motorcycles, we could drive the Skidoos, we could take the boats out. There's a lot of good sides to it. We could do what we wanted. We could do what we wanted as long as we was doing what we were supposed to do and get paid to do. So we was taught very well.
Well, so again, to give it some context, you go from doing laboring jobs through the weekends and evenings, washing windows with vinegar and things like that, you said, to now you're interacting with the public and you're representing these products and trying to help them make the decision to buy. What were some of the things that you had to learn or challenges that you had to overcome to enable you to do that initially?
Well, through my years of high school and stuff, when I was in Fredericton High School, I was, even though I worked 35 hours a week, I look back, don't know how I did it all now, but I was also the trainer for the high school hockey team. So that got me meeting people and going places and seeing things and interacting with people. And my father was in the Army before we moved to St. John, so we changed cities a few times. So talking to people and being friendly, and my parents were good parents. They was nice to people. They was friendly. They, if you met my mother, my mother's Irish, and, she'd be, you'd think you and her were best friends in about 3 minutes. And it just wasn't easy because, I come from a place where you had to work, you had to care about people, and you liked what you did. So, there wasn't, we didn't get training at Sullivan's to speak of. We had, we learned from, you learn from the guy that was sharing the office with you. And fortunately, in that case, there was a young fella, he was a year older than me. His name was Philip Barrett. And selling came really, really natural to him. And his father was the manager of the new car. Gerald also had a Toyota store. And Phil's father, Stan, was the manager of that store. And Stan was, he'd been one of them people you'd say you could sell ice to an Eskimo. And I shared an office with Philip, and I would listen to Philip call his father and say, Dad, I'm in the middle of this sale, or this customer said this, I said that. And usually you can hear if you're hearing one side of the conversation really good, and you got a talker, Philip was a talker, so you knew what Stan was saying. So I was learning really, it was baptism by fire, but I had some really, really, really good salespeople around me that taught me well and shared with their knowledge, and it worked out really, really well. And like I said, Gerald, he gave us the world as long as we did what we were supposed to do.
I'm getting the impression that you had and have kind of a natural resourcefulness and curiosity to you, Jim. How accurate is that to say?
Well, it's true, yes. Yeah, I'm one of them fellas like Gary says, I shoot the gun, I'll ride the bullet. Pull the trigger, I ride the bullet. So, yeah, you try stuff. I'm not scared to try anything, not scared to try new things, and some work, some don't. When I'm listening to a guy beside me selling his product and, what he's saying and what he's telling the customers. Like we sold boats that year. We sold boats to Sullins, and I actually was never on a speedboat in my life, and I sold the most boats that summer they ever sold, that one of their salesmen ever sold. And I did it because I knew nothing, but I also knew enough to shut up and let the customer tell me all about the boat, because luckily customers are experts, and I learned really, really quick, if you let the experts tell you everything, they actually are selling themselves. All you got to do is sit back and smile, but you learn a lot, because fortunately, when it come to that kind of stuff, a lot of the customers really were experts. They knew a lot more than I would know, so I learned from my customers. The more I listened, the more I smiled. The more I smiled, the more they bought.
I love how you said, well, I love everything that you just said, Jim, but that you knew that you knew nothing. I'm paraphrasing. That wasn't exactly what you said. And the phrase that immediately popped into my mind is not knowing what you don't know. Sometimes that can help if you're not afraid to ride the bullet, right?
Yeah, we that's so important. We not knowing what you don't know and knowing that you don't know it, and living that way, I think you can go far. Everybody wants to tell you a lot of stuff, so let them tell it to you.
At what point along all of this did you start to become aware that you had your own entrepreneurial instincts?
Well, like when you're selling, and especially, I believe, now I'm not saying I'm right here, but I believe if you're a salesperson, you're working for yourself. You're not working for somebody else. So I figured that out really fast. Somebody else was just supplying me an office and a product. I got, it was commission based, so you're working for yourself. He might sign the paycheck, but you earned it. So I believe a good salesperson should be a good business owner, if they want to try other things. So I worked for Gerald for, I think, 3 years, and I learned a lot, and he was very good to me. And I married a girl, and I didn't know it at the time because I only sold new Hondas. I wasn't into used cars at all. Like I wasn't even at the used car place of the Honda store, so we only handled brand new stuff. And the girl I married, Donna, her father was the biggest wholesaler of used vehicles in the province of New Brunswick at the time. And like I said, I didn't even know that till I think almost a little while before we got married, because I knew he sold used cars, but I wasn't into it, so I didn't realize the magnitude of the used car business. I knew nothing about it. But also, he was a really, really nice guy, and everybody loved him, and he would help people out, and I was fortunate enough to watch him, and then he gave his son and me an opportunity to start into the used car business. So I left my new car toy business, and I started selling used cars of my own. And all that Donna's father gave us, Lauren, he gave us an opportunity, and that was it. Like, we had to run with it. He didn't tell us nothing. He didn't, other than, here's a car, I just paid $1,000 for it, you should be able to sell it for $1,200, and that was it. He didn't give us, but he backed a note for us so we could buy the cars, and we had to learn under fire how to run a business, and how you got to run a business now and back then. Fortunately, back then it wasn't as complicated and as much stuff to do. So we grabbed I'm 21 years old. I grabbed the bull by the horns, and again, I rode the bullet, and we're 37, I guess that's 23, so 37 years later, 38 years later, we're still going strong.
Take me a little bit further back into that time, if you don't mind, Jim, of moving from the Honda dealership and into that world where you're saying that Donna's dad just gave you an opportunity and gave you a car, and that it was your job to sell it. How much of the infrastructure of the business did you have to actually build out, and kind of what did it look like at that time initially?
Oh, the infrastructure, there was nothing. Like, he did have an old building that he rented us, me and his son, and he didn't give us a car. We had to pay for the car. Like, he was a wholesaler, so he would buy like 120 cars a month. And fortunately, he would, he said these 10 got some money left in them, and we would get first dibs on the wholesale cars to retail them, because he would sell to other used car dealers too. So we had to pay him for the cars. Actually, we had to buy the building from him, which we did. And we opened up a Petro-Canada, actually it was a FINA then, so we opened up a gas station, because the building that we rented from or bought from eventually used to be an old gas station. So John McMulkin from FINA came along and wanted to know if we'd sell gas, so we opened up a little gas bar and a used car lot, and we bought the building from our father-in-law, so for that, like, he gave us a good price, hopefully. And we bought all the cars, and we was lucky that he was getting cars that we could buy from him before other car dealers did. But we had to go to town and get them. We had to clean them. We had to sell them. We had to pump the gas. And like, I can remember when we first started, my brother-in-law is Rod Seeley. We're not partners now, but for the first 5 years, when we first started, we actually worked 13 days straight and got every other Sunday off, because there was only me and Roddy. So you'd go in at 7 in the morning, because you had to open up for pumping gas, and you worked till 9 o'clock every night. And then you worked Saturday together, and then one of you didn't work Sunday. And that's how we went 13 days and one off, 13 days and one off. And back to we didn't know. We thought that was normal. Like, if you wanted something, you worked for it. We wanted to build a business, we got out and worked for it. So we worked, and we grew the business. We cleaned the cars, we sold the cars, we pumped the gas, we mopped the floor, and we had to learn. If we want to put an ad in the paper, we had to even back then, putting an ad in the paper was hard enough. You had to figure your ad out, and how much space and how many lines, and you put a little ad in the paper, and Petro-Canada would come, and you'd have to have all your credit card slips ready for them, so that you didn't have to pay. Like, they took the credit card amount off your gas, so you had to pay for your gas. And like, they don't give you your gas, you pay for it before it goes in the ground. And it was a fun ride. It was a learning experience, because you didn't eat the next morning if you didn't sell something or make somebody happy the day before. There was no ifs and buts. You had to look after people. You had to get people back. You had to, the biggest dread of all, you had to deal with government officials and rules and regulations, and people that, people work 9 to 4 telling you what to do, but you learn to cope, and you learn how to handle it all, and you either do it or you don't. It wasn't an easy ride, but it was a really fun one.
What were some of the things that you initially had to figure out and put together to even be able to buy that building and have the resources to buy those initial cars and get the gas station going? In other words, what are the things that you needed to do just to even get set up to do what you just described?
Well, like Donna's father, like, he went down to the bank and he signed a loan for the bank to lend us $10,000, and he backed it. And they only did that for 1 year, and 1 year that was over. He took his name off that. which was good. So, there was nobody giving us nothing that way, which was made you learn. He had an old building that it used to be a gas station years earlier, and it was sat there for 5 years with nothing in it. So we had to go in there. We had to build a front on it. Like we had to do woodwork, like get 2x4s and cut 2x4s and put doors in and paint floors and paint the pavement outside, paint the curbing. Like, we had to do all that. Like, and there was nobody around to do it for you. You either did it. Like, we was 15 miles outside the city of Fredericton. So you either did it or didn't get done, but you learned it. And when I was at Sullins for 3 years, I learned how stuff should look and how business should be run and how you had to do your paperwork. I understood paperwork because we had to do all our own at Sullins. So, a lot of the stuff that they have to do in business, I was quite aware of. And my brother-in-law, Rod, he was very smart. He was very smart, so he understood it as well. So between the two of us, you had to figure it out. When Petro-Canada come and they want us to become a gas station, that was a good thing for us because it gave us an anchor. Like, it anchored our business somewhere. Back then you could make money off gas. So we had an anchor for the business. We had a gas station that kept our hours. We had to have sturdy hours in from 7 to 9 at night. So everything that we had to learn and do actually helped us for the next day. We had competition in the gas business. So that right up the road, we had a guy, other people selling gas. So you had to learn that you weren't the only gas station on the highway. There was more there. You had to learn to be good to customers, and you learn quick that you had to have those few customers keep coming back to you, because if you lost a customer, there wasn't a lot around to make up. So you had to keep your customers. You had to learn your paperwork, and luckily the bank, they have a lot of rules in place when they're lending you money that you have to do stuff every month for them. The sales tax, the government, they have rules in place. Every month you had to send your sales tax in and your motor vehicle forms in. So, you did stuff that you had to do because you had no other choice, but everything you did taught you to do the next thing that you had to do. So it all worked out.
What was one of the harder lessons that you learned during that time, Jim?
Oh, probably the hardest lessons was I always lived in the city. Like, my father's in an army camp, and that's like in the city. Like, everything's supplied. After he left the army, we lived in the city, and then I moved out of town. It was 15 miles out of town. Well, I was an outsider. And probably, I'm 23, 24 years old. I think I know everything. I'm this big city boy in a rural community, and I was taught pretty quick that I wasn't a big city boy in a rural community, and if I wanted to be part of the community, I better follow the community ways, I guess to say it. So I learned quick that you don't think you're a big shit. Like, you got to learn, you got to go along, you got to pay your dues, you got to go along with the flow and make sure people don't dislike you, because if you're in a small community and the wrong person dislikes you, you're toast.
Boy, isn't that ever true.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Jim, if you remember what the first car was that you guys sold with that initial business.
Actually, I do. It was one of them big old, somebody listening to somebody will remember. It was a big old Dodge Monocos. It was bigger than, I don't think there's a car out there as big today, but there was a big old Dodge Monocos, but you could buy them cheap and sell them cheap. Gas was cheap back then, right? 50 or 80 cents a gallon. We were using gallons back then. Yep. I remember our gas pumps when gas went over $1 a gallon, our gas pumps had to be changed because we couldn't make them go over $1 a gallon. We termed out at 99 cents. So, but it was a big old brown and cream colored Dodge Monaco, big 4-door boat.
Let's get back into the evolution of this then, that you described a situation where you and your brother-in-law are just doing literally everything, and you're working extended hours, as you've said a couple times. You didn't know what you didn't know, every other Sunday off. What was the next evolution, or what you might classify as a forward step to that?
Well, as we buy a car, sell a car, and that money was our profit, and we didn't take a lot of money out. Like, I think we only took $150 a week out for pay. And, you know, like I was married, and Roddy had a girlfriend then, and so we didn't have much money, but we worked so much you didn't need that much money either. But as we get going, we was able to, you know, like, we got enough money ahead that we could hire like somebody to pump the gas, which freed us up more to buy and sell the cars. And that went on probably for quite a while. And so we ended up getting some gas pumpers there, but we still had to clean the bathrooms because they didn't want to do that. and that was like the next step. As we grew, we would add on some people, and we started with one car, and we built it up to 10 and 12 and 15 cars. And, you know, we didn't, you know, and that's about where we stagnated out probably in the first 5 years, was once we had a couple of employees and 15 cars. I think at that time, my brother-in-law, that was good enough for him. He was happy. And, you know, we made fair money at the time. It wasn't good money, but we didn't know, so we thought we was doing all right. And then, but I wanted something more than just a corner gas bar with 15 cars. So that's me and him kind of changed. We separated out, and I went and rented a place in town and started a car lot in town myself, and he kept our place in Durham Bridge. So that was a big step because, you know, we had a 5-year established place in Durham Bridge, and, you know, we was doing all right. We was eating, you know, we could add some hot dogs to the craft dinner, so everything was going good. And then but then we separated our ways, and I remember we had 20 cars at the time. I said, I'll take 10 cars, and I'm going to go around a place in town, and you got 10 cars, and you can have everything out here, and we'll call it, like, you know, we ended our partnership at that time. And he stayed in Durham Bridge and sold cars, and I moved to town and rented a little corner. Actually, it was a little corner lot, and from there I was able to be on my own, and I was back to one person. And I worked hard, and every time I got more money, I bought more cars, and I was strictly in the car business and loved every minute of it.
How was it personally between you and Rod in that transition?
It was quite well because we got along good, and Roddy was, like I said, he's probably one of the smartest people I knew, but he was happy with what we had, and I wanted more, so we just saw it a different way to what our futures would be. So, you know, like he kept the garage that was all paid for and half the cars, and all I did was get half the cars and move to town. So, you know, he came out of it quite well, and I was very happy the way I came out of it. It was a win-win situation for both of us. And, we're still very good friends, and, you know, I don't believe that, like, I don't think we had any animosity. Like, he today has what he wants, and I today have what I want.
How did you know, Jim? Like, because you've described a couple of times that, you know, you were earning fair money, but you were working so much you didn't need a lot of money. And just in terms of the context of life, you knew it sounded like you were progressing well and things were going okay, but there also seemed to be a really clear idea in your mind that there was something more.
Well, there was. When I worked at Selland Honda, and we had a nice new building, or not nice, we had a nice building, and we had lots of inventory, and we had staff, and we had parts, we had service, and we had advertising, and we had a big sign out front. So we had a business, what I would call a really good business. And when I was in Durham Bridge, I just had a little gas bar with some cars, and I wanted more. Like, I wanted a larger business that would grow and expand. I wanted, I lived out of the city for 10 years, and I think I wanted to get back into the city and back closer to the town. And my wife and I, actually, we had our first baby, and Alex was 3 or 4 years old, and you had to get to town. Like, we'd become power skating, and it was, even though it was still like half an hour to come in, half hour to go out. So both of us wanted to live closer to town, where the arenas were and the ball fields were, and to move in town from where we was, you had to be making more money for a house in town. It was higher cost of living, I guess. We knew we wanted, and to do that, we had to step it up a notch.
What was it like then, Jim, when you did initially go into town, you rent the building, now you're in the reverse situation of where you were before, being a city guy going out into the country and having to get involved in that community. Now you're doing the other way around, but kind of back to where you were again. What was the evolution of that within the next, sort of 6, 12, 24 months?
Well, it was all right, because we sold a lot of our cars in town. We bought all our cars from dealers in town. My friends were in town. The people I knew were in town. It was there was no issue there. Like, the big issue was, I looked outside and I had 10 cars to my name. That was whatever them 10 cars were worth. That's every penny I had, and from there I had to make a living. And cars back then, like, they're not the $20,000, $30,000 cars they are today. Like, we're only talking $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 cars. We're not talking, so when you do the math, I had $30,000 or $40,000 tops in cars, and I had to make a living out of that. And I bought a house in town I had to make payments on. And my wife, actually, she did have a government job, and she left that to come and be the bookkeeper and help me in that job and answer the phone. So the two of us, started out, and you either sold a car, you just didn't eat that week. It was really that simple, but that's the way it was, and I was happy with that life.
What was that like for the marriage at that time? You were always together and sharing the same challenges all the time.
That actually was probably the best thing that could ever happen in my view, to a marriage, because when it's not anybody, it doesn't matter what you're doing when you're out there in the public, it doesn't, and you're selling, like, it doesn't matter if you work at a convenience store selling cars, even you're a fireman, like, you come home and you bring your problems home from work. And, my wife worked for the government, and she got off, like, she worked from 8:30 to 4:30 and had a good job and steady. And they have to work in the government, but I don't think people in the government a lot realize what people out there working nights and days and weekends go through, and the rejections and the issues and the headaches that you're doing, because you don't have a paycheck Friday if you don't put the hours in or the time in. So when my wife came work for me with us, together, me and her, we had this little tiny building, the wind and blow right through it. We had to get a little heater by her feet in the wintertime just to keep her from freezing, but she never complained. And, she would hear, like, the customers and, some of the negative stuff people would say to me or to somebody. And, so when you're a little frustrated over something, or you bought a car that somebody told you was a real good car and it wasn't a good car, and end up, you spent all the money fixing it and lost money on it, or when the revenue person came in and made a new rule that you weren't aware of the next day, and she was there living it and feeling it. So in our case, I think it was a really, really good thing that both of us were going through the same thing day in, day out, because then, you don't come home at night with issues because you already went through them at 2:00 in the afternoon. So we had a good life at it. I don't know if it worked for everybody, but it certainly worked for us.
At what point was it then, Jim, that the two of you arrived at, and I'm probably skipping over a large part here, but I know there's a big part that I want to get to and spend some time while I've got you with me. But at what point was it in that evolution that you jointly felt like, okay, we've sort of hit a little bit of a ceiling and we've either leveled off and need to accept that or need to do something radically different?
Well, actually, that's a really good question. We had our car lot, so for the first 5 or 6 years, Roddy and me were partners, and then we split our partnership, and so I was off my own, Roddy was off on his own, and I would say I went along for another 10 or 12 years, and I did what everybody else did. Like by that time, I only had like a car lot in town that could hold 20 cars. Like that was it. Like if I had the money to buy 1 million cars, it didn't matter because I only had pavement that would hold 20 cars. So I built it up to 20 cars, and then with the money, I would buy nicer cars. So I went from like $3,000 cars to $5,000 cars to $10,000 cars. So as I got more money, I didn't buy more cars, but I was getting into a better class of cars with warranty and stuff. And so that actually takes a lot of money. So I was going along with my 20 cars, 22 cars, whatever it was. And I'm happy. The world's good. I'm making my mortgage payments. As I would get more money, I would reinvest it in better cars, and everything's going along, in my view, pretty good because I don't know more than the next person. So I'm watching what everybody else is doing, and I'm basically doing what everybody else is doing. I got 20 cars, and I'm happy. And then there was a guy that moved into Fredericton, New Brunswick, and I knew him. He actually bought a house. He was a car dealer. He bought a house not too far from my house. And he came in with 100 cars, which at that time was massive. And he told me, he said, Jim, I'm going to have 100 cars. I'm going to sell 100 cars a month. I'm going to make $1,000 a car, and I'm going to make $1 million a year. Like it sounded pretty simple, right? And he had the money for the 100 cars. Well, I don't think he'd make 1,000 on a car, but his plan was pretty successful, I think. I think he did quite well. He might not have sold his 100 cars a month, but I bet you he was selling 70, 80, 90. And he was really changing the used car business in our city. And every other car dealer, including myself, you'd whine and cry and complain because he's sucking up all the business and people are going to him. Well, he was giving the people more choices and more selection, and that's where we're going. But we didn't know enough that that's what was going on. We figured he was the devil. So we're watching it. But while everybody else is complaining, I'm watching and thinking, that he's got the right answer here. He's doing it right, but I don't have the money for that, so I got to keep doing what everybody else is doing, I guess. So I knew there was a different way to do things, but how do you do them? And if you don't know how to do them, you kind of slack off. And then a guy walked in the door. This other man walked in the door one day from Nova Scotia, and he wanted me to sell this electronic form of Amway. I don't remember what it was called, but it was Amway, but it was like computerized Amway. Like this would be in like 1998, right around then. Like the web's only 4 or 5 years old at the time, and people were starting to use it and develop different things. And he gave me some cassettes, and there was some Zig Ziglar cassettes. Now, when I went through high school, I hardly did any book reading or any learning. So for me to read and listen to, and that stuff, I didn't do a lot. But at that time, it's like if the pupil's ready, the teacher shows up. So the gentleman, he gave me some Zig Ziglar cassettes. And my jumpins, I went home and I put them in cars and I listened to those word after word. And I'd listen to them over and over, 3 or 4 cassettes. And I listened, within a week, I listened to every one of them, and I kept listening. And Zig Ziglar was saying, you got to take responsibility for yourself. You got to step up yourself. Don't expect other people to do it. And it was just real good, positive stuff. And as I got listening, I said to my wife, I said, if this guy's talking about this, there's got to be other tapes out there. So then all of a sudden you seen the midnight show of Tony Robbins, buy my cassettes and I'm going to transform your life. So I bought the Tony Robbins and I bought the Zig Ziglar and the Tom Hawkins, and I would listen, and I mean listen to it. I would immerse myself into it, and through that I learned, and I believe that just because all these guys are doing it this way, I don't got to do it that way. I can do it my own way. So then I looked again at the guy that's selling 100 cars a month, and I'm thinking, okay, what's he doing right? What can I do? And what's he doing? Instead of whining about what he's doing, what's he doing right? And we're going to copy it, but what's he doing wrong that we can do better? And when I watched it, and I knew the gentleman, I actually, even when his wife unexpectedly had to go in the hospital, me and my wife had looked after his kids for a week because he was from out of town, so he had nobody to look after his young kids. So even though he's my competition and I'm watching him, I still looked after his kids because it's the right thing to do. But I watched him, and one thing he didn't do is he didn't look after customers after he sold the car. He sold the car, and you walk back in the next day, it was like the used car story that, curb and got and get out of here, and because he was older than me, probably 10 years older than me, and that's what he believed used cars was. He wasn't a bad person, but that's what used cars was. So as I watched him and as I listened to those cassettes and changed the whole way I thought about everything, I said, I'm going to get a better lot. So I was lucky I got a lot that would handle more cars. And I borrowed some money and I got invested into more cars. So I got myself up to 30 cars and 40 cars and 50 cars. And what I kept doing was, if you bought a car from me and you come back, I would help you out and do something. And I would inspect my cars properly before I sold them. I would change oil before I sold them. And today that sounds like, ooh, everybody does that. But back then, nobody did that. So I was different. My cars had brand new real inspections on them. In New Brunswick, we do a motor vehicle inspection. The oil was changed, and I had stuff done to my cars. So when you drove away, you didn't have to do a brake job of like a month or 2 months down the road. So I kept growing my car lot. I kept listening to more, reading more books. I kept listening to more positive tapes. And as I was growing to my 40, 50, 60 sales, my friend that had the 100, who by that time me and him were head-to-head in competition because everybody else had 20 cars. Well, he was going from 100 to 90 to 80 to 70, and I was going from 40, 50, 60 to 70. I was going up, he was going down, and we never stopped at that. We just kept pushing it and putting all our money back in our business and making our building larger and more staff and hiring salesmen and we've never stopped to this day. We're still looking forward and growing. So it was in 1998. It was a big change. I always say it like everybody says it takes 20 years for an overnight success. So for the first 20 years I bubbled around like everybody else, and then I become successful when I learned to look after myself and not expect other people to do it for me. And you give back, you help out, and become part of the community. And in 2005, I got the business, and it still means a lot to me today. But our Chamber of Commerce gave me the Small Business Award of the Year for the city of Fredericton, and for a car dealer to get an award like that, I knew then I was on the right track, because people were noticing that, geez, this guy's doing a great job, and he's doing good things in the community, and he's growing his business, and it was like the universe opened up and things were going right for me, and we've never looked back.
What's the story, Jim, behind becoming Huggable?
Well, that goes in with the Zig Ziglar tapes. Like, as I listened to Zig Ziglar's and Tom Hawkins and the Brian Tracy's, and I didn't listen for 1 week or 1 month. Like, this was year after year. I went to see Tony Robbins twice, and I went to see Brian Tracy, and I would start investing money to go and meet these people firsthand and go to their seminars and read their books. And you also get exercise, and then you change your whole body. I didn't want to go out and, I would say, use the word party no more. Like, I didn't want to be sitting in a bar at 6 o'clock at night complaining. Like, I wanted to learn and grow. And so I changed my whole life, really. And so I never stopped learning. And I say now it's called always be learning. And in 2005 or so, the Chamber of Commerce was putting on an event at one of them morning breakfasts where they bring a speaker in. Now, by this time, I've read a lot of books. I've tried a lot of stuff. I'm growing the business. I'm up to 10 or 12 staff. And, I'm heading in the right direction, but I knew there had to be more. We're doing some marketing. We're doing some advertising. We got slogans on our building that say we're going to be number one. And, we're following the books, but there's a whole bunch of different books and a whole bunch of different ideas and a whole bunch of different ways, and none's wrong. But I seem to be doing a lot of 20 different thousand things simultaneously. And I said, I got so much going right. I got to get this more fine pointed in a direction, right? So in 2005, the Chamber of Commerce was putting on a speaker, and it was about sales training, because I also knew, probably from my lack of training at selling Honda, that you got to invest in your people and yourself, because I was a salesman, and I had another guy selling, and we hired another guy. So I knew that we got to do some sales training. Like I was the guy doing our sales training. Then I'd read a book and go tell my other two guys about the book. I'd paraphrase it or summarize it and then share it with my staff. And so we was on a good learning curve. So I went listening to this guy, and he's talking about sales training. And he seemed to have a pretty good sales training thing. And it wasn't a lot of money. Even though you're doing good, you don't have a lot of money to spend. And so it's a Chambers of Commerce breakfast from 7 to 9, and this guy stops talking at 8:45, and at 8:46, there's me and my salesperson who's still with me right now is my general manager, Johnny Liakis, and the man that was talking, Gary Maxwell. Everybody else was gone. You could have shot a bullet through it. They couldn't get out the door fast enough, so I'm standing there. And Gare comes over and he says, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I'd be interested in hearing more about your sales training." So we made an appointment. He was going to come over to Wheels and Deals that morning or that afternoon. He had a few other things he had to do in Fredericton. He came over, and he had a little, sales training system. And he would actually come from. He said, I'll teach you guys this, and I'll come from Moncton once a week or once a month and work with you on it. And the price was very, very reasonable. So I said, that's a good idea. I knew we needed some more structure somewhere, and I'm not the structure guy. I'm the hunter. I got to remember, I'm ride the bullet, eh? But I knew there had to be structure, but I wouldn't be the guy I'd pick for the structure, right? So I said, well, great, this is going to work out. We'll hire him, and he's going to come in. He's going to help us. He had a program in place. He'd come in, I think it was every 2 weeks. And actually, I used to have him stay right at my house because I couldn't even really afford a motel for him. So he would come in, and we had an extra room there, and he would stay in that night and work with our staff and our team the next day and then go over the stuff. But I was fortunate because Gare, and I didn't know much about the gentleman's past, so I only knew he was a sales trainer. I didn't know nothing. But, because he would come in on say Monday night, stay at my house, have dinner at the house with us, stay overnight, have breakfast, I learned more and more from him besides training. And Gare really wanted to be a marketer, I think, and I loved doing that. We all of a sudden had this common thing that, if we do this and change this and tell people this and do this for the people, this is going to happen. So we used to really talk more about, we didn't know what it was back then, but we talked more about marketing the evening before the training. So Gare kept training, but we would be sharing marketing. And so me and Gare would talk about stuff, and I would try, and I would do it. Like I was like the guinea pig. I'm the incubator. Let's try it. So we got trying stuff, and then Gare got actually using stuff that I was doing with his sales training. So he became a sales trainer marketer because of me and him doing the marketing stuff. So that was in, I think, 2000. I'm not sure what year that was, 2003, 2004, maybe or 5. I got no idea. So me and Gare were working together for a couple of years, him learning marketing from me, when I say learning from me, he would have ideas, and I would add to the ideas and go do it. And then we would know if it worked, and this worked, that didn't work. And then Gare got more into marketing than he did sales training, because that's what he really wanted to do. And then one day he gets on a plane and he goes to a place in Austin, Texas called the Wizard of Ads. Well, he comes back from the Wizard of Ads and he's all excited and he's really pumped up, and he brings back a guy, Ray Sagarin, from the Wizard of Ads, and they get me to, Gare says, listen, Ray Sagarin's going to take you into another world when it comes to marketing. And, he's a radio station guy, and we're going to take our ads. So what we did is, and it was true, Ray took all our ads, and the ads would be, we never talked about the car. We talked about you driving up the road, dream me a dream, and the tail lights, we look after you long after your tail lights fade away. And we never ever advertised the car, just the feeling of the car and the feeling the open air and the air blowing through your wind and stuff. Well, that kind of advertising was never heard of, I think, in probably hardly anywhere in North America, and Fredericton was really new. And, our sales were increasing like really, you could tell our sales were increasing. Customers coming in, they loved our ads. People were talking about our ads. And then they got me to go to Austin, Texas. So this was like about a year that we had some ads going. And then me and Ray and Gare went to Austin, Texas to see Ray and do a Wizard Academy course. And I guess this, before the ads come, actually, tell you the truth, this would be, Ray came up, and then I had to go back to Texas. So we didn't write an ad that time. And when I went back, Ray had some ads made for us, and the ads were, I'm going to call them U.S. election style ads. It was just tear the other person apart ads. It was just, just terrible ads, talking about your competition. And I remember telling him, I said, Ray, I said, my wife would never allow me to put an ad on the radio like that. Other car dealers, I think they still do it today, other companies, but I said, my wife will never, ever allow that kind of advertising. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, we just want to talk about the good stuff. Like, let's just tell people the nice stuff we do. I do a lot of extra stuff. I look after people. I do stuff in the community. I don't say no to nobody. I said, let's talk about that. And Ray says, so you think you're huggable? And I looked at him, and I can remember he was right at the Wizard Academy, and I said, you said it right there. I am huggable, and I care about people. And then he wrote all the ads to the being huggable and dreamy, and our ads took off like radio. This was long before social media, so radio was a big thing, and our sales we never looked back. It was just like a rocket sled on wheels.
Before I ask you any more questions, I just want to ask if you're okay for a few more minutes, because I've had you for a while now, but it feels like we're just getting into the meat of this part of the story, and I'd like to take a few more minutes to tell it. Are you cool with that?
Listen, I'm talking about my favorite subject, me. Why wouldn't I be?
Okay, so Ray says you think you're huggable.
Yeah. He had some other choice words in there.
I'm sure, but it's a long journey, I think, Jim, from that to Canada's Huggable car dealer and everything. As if someone were to visit you online or to walk into the dealership now with what they'd see, how did that initially start to manifest? Right in those early days, even in as much as he says you think you're huggable, and how that filters through your mind and lands as something that you can actually make come alive at the dealership.
Well, it was really neat because something happens in your universe and stuff goes on simultaneously and you don't really know about it. But if you're doing the right thing, the right people show up and the right things will go in your favor, I guess the only way to say it. So we was good and we was doing the right thing. And Ray said we're huggable. At the same time, Gare's son Ryan, he's actually the same age as my son. He's 19 or 20 at the time, 18 or 19. He makes us a logo, and he put the wings on it and the Gilbert Wheels and Deals. So we have a logo, and today that doesn't seem like much, but when you go back 10, 12 years, that's a big thing when a little corner lot has their own logo. Like, we're not General Motors with our big GM, Ford with that nice symbol, or Chrysler with theirs. Like, we built our own logo. And Ryan did that, all in the same time frame. So we have a logo that it was unheard of for a used car dealer actually to have their logo. I remember we used to go to the Montreal auction where there was thousands of car dealers. The biggest car auction in Canada. And there was one other car dealer, Jacques de Carey, and he used to have his own logo, and that was it. Like, the only other logos you saw was from new car dealers. So this is really, we're going into new uncharted territory. We have our own logo, we have our own tagline, Canada's Huggable Car Dealer. This is like 12, 15 years ago. This is unheard of. Like, we're butting heads with, Ford and Chrysler and Honda with stuff that they think, like new car dealers or new manufacturers think they own all the rights to. And all of a sudden, here you are coming up with a logo and a tagline and a statement. And so we come back, we're Canada's Huggable Car Dealer. We have some ads with Canada's Huggable Car Dealer. We have a logo that Ryan made us. 19 years old, he makes us a logo that we still use today, and so we're running, and we're doing pretty good. We had a good name, and we built up a good name in the car business over the years, because you got to remember we won an award for Small Business Excellence Award. So there's a lot of stuff going simultaneously. We're always talking positive, and I got people coming to me. I'm lending out Brian Tracy books and to other people to learn how to better themselves. So there's a lot of stuff happening, and as we get going, my wife and she's really brilliant. She comes up with the idea that we should have a little bear, and I'm thinking a bear, and because I'm immersed trying to sell cars and rob Peter to pay Paul. And it was great to have her and an open brain that could think up other stuff too. So she actually would go, and she went to the dollar stores, and she went to all the dollar stores in Fredericton and bought all these little bears. And then she drove 100 kilometers to the dollar store in St. John, New Brunswick, and bought up all their bears. Then 200 kilometers to the dollar store in Moncton, New Brunswick, and bought up all their dollar bears. And we'd hang these little bears in the windows, and so all of a sudden the bear, we have a logo, we have a Kansas Huggable car dealer, we have this bear, and we were starting to have like some really strong anchors to the story. And then back before that, in 1998, something my wife did was we started, and she did this, and it was by hand. God bless her soul. She started sending out birthday cards. We read a book. She would read the books too, from Joe Girard, and he was the greatest car salesman the world's ever seen. And he said, like, he would always send out cards on birthday, cards on the dog's birthday, cards at Christmas, cards at Valentine's, and that's how he grew his business, was by sending out thank you cards and birthday cards and cards and cards and cards. So Donna said we should send out birthday cards. So, we back it up in 1998. We started sending out birthday cards, handwritten birthday cards to customers. So we're the only ones doing this in the whole city in any business, right? We got, like, nobody else is doing it because it's an expense. But she would do it. So we already started building a following up where people said, they sell pretty good cards. They don't forget about you. They remember my birthday. And then we started sending out from cards, little birthday gifts in the cards. So, we're building up a following or like a retention program without even knowing it. So, we got a retention program going. We got a logo. We got a nice tagline. We got some good ads. We got a sales trainer. Just a lot of stuff's happening all at the same time. A lot of moving parts are moving in the right direction. And then when we added the bears to it, that actually reinforced the Huggable, because in everybody's mind, Huggable can mean different things, but 99.9% it means something to smile about. And the bear is, like everybody that's grown up in Canada or North America, a bear is a huggy thing to them. So we was able to, like I call it, like we're building a temple one brick at a time. And you lay a brick, and then you lay another brick on top of it. So we're building our wall. Like everything we did was to strengthen the wall, and we kept adding bricks to the wall, and we kept looking, and it just, and even today we keep adding on to that wall. We don't stop. We keep adding on. But in the earlier years, like this all was going on simultaneously, it was guys like Gare. And then another fortunate thing happened one morning. This is good here. I'm reading a book from Brian Tracy, because I'd get up and I'd exercise every morning. I had an elliptical trainer, and I could read while I was using it. And I'm reading a book by Brian Tracy, and he talks about peer groups and peer programs. And you got to get in mastermind groups, because one person can't do it on their own. They got to get in mastermind groups. Well, I never even heard the word mastermind group up to that morning, or peer group up. I'm listening to it from a book Brian Tracy wrote. And a guy walks in the door at 9 o'clock that morning, right after 3 hours earlier. I'm reading Brian Tracy telling me to get in a mastermind group. And he started a group in New Brunswick called Tech. It's the Executive's Choice, and it's a group of executives that would get together and spend one day a month together and bring in speakers from all over the world. So you'd start learning from the very speakers that I'm reading about. We'd have to start bringing them in. And plus, we would get other people in our business that, say, weren't in the car business. You couldn't be in the same business, and start learning their business and learning what they're going through and what they went through and helping each other. So, that was another big part of that moving part. And I'm still in the tech group today, so I sit with, some of the biggest businesses in New Brunswick, and you're learning, like the learning is crazy, the amount of learning you're doing and seeing. So that's helping you along. Gear's helping you along with your marketing. Your staff's growing, your team's growing, my wife's helping me. It just, things were just going real good. We knew that with Huggable, that was, we had an anchor, and we anchored onto that Huggable, and we have never stopped. Like I remember Ray Sagrin in Texas telling me, like they sat down and explained to me in Texas, this is it. Everything you do is Huggable. Everything you say is Huggable. Everything you do tomorrow is Huggable. Everything has to anchor that Huggable. Like if you do something that doesn't have to do, that makes you Huggable, you don't do it now. And so I had some really, really good people giving me really good advice and working with me, and they're all making money off me doing this, but that's called win-win-win, right? They're doing their job, and they're helping me do my job. They're growing, like Ray Sagrin in Texas. I'm his very first customer that he had when he went off in his own Wizard of Ads business. Now I was to Austin, Texas 2 months ago, and Ray got this nice big office, a nice big building. He's got his own radio shows and everything, and I was his very first guy that trusted him and gave him money. And Gary Maxwell, same way. Like, he came from something happened different. He was in the radio business. He's trying to do training. He really loved its marketing and speaking. And because I joined the tech group, I was able to get Gare into the tech circuit, where it's the biggest speaker circuit in the world that has the most speakers. They use the most speakers. And Gare was Speaker of the Year a few years ago, and he was over in London, England last month speaking. And so a lot of people did a lot of stuff for me, and I did a lot of stuff for a lot of people, and we all stayed Huggable doing it, if that makes any sense. We had a program, and we focused on it, and we stayed focused. Even now I have 2 kids in my business, and they're running it, and they know, like everything has to do with that one word, Huggable, and we have lots of symbols and lots of ideas, and even my staff, I have my own service department now with mechanics and all that, and I tell my service manager, if somebody comes with a problem, it's cheaper to fix it than me having to go spend money to find another customer. And chances are a lot of their problems, especially here in New Brunswick, is they really just can't afford to fix their car right then. So help them out and fix it. Do something for them. Like, don't say no. Do something, and we got that through to most of our staff, and that carries you and propels you.
Before we wrap up, at least for this conversation, because Jim, I'm certainly hoping there are going to be many more. I know we could take any one of these things that you've mentioned and talk easily for an hour on any of them, and I'm really grateful that you would share this time with me, Jim. There's one part, and I got to be transparent about it. I wouldn't have thought to ask this if it weren't for Gare. But ever since he mentioned it to me, I've been curious. So you've talked about the Huggable, but there's something else that could slide by really easily if you weren't paying attention to it. And that's the precursor to that, Canada's Huggable car dealer. I'm curious about how that evolved to brand your, and I'm going to almost sound like I'm deliberately talking down on it here, Jim, and I think you know why I'm doing that, but a used car lot in a town in New Brunswick, Canada, as opposed to sort of naming it after the city, branding it as something that of a national nature that's Huggable. And tell me about how that decision came to be.
Well, in your elevator speech, you got the most you should have is 6 words, right? Who in Timbuktu heard about Fredericton, or New Brunswick for that matter? But Canada, if you really think of it, and I travel all through the world, they're the nicest people in the world. There's this nice big country. Everybody wants to come to it. For the most part, we're a well-respected, loved country around the world. So Canada fits in with Huggable so good, right? So when we come up with Huggable, I remember, and Ray, he was an American. He's in Austin, Texas. So he said, Canada's Huggable car dealer. And that was it. Like, that was it. Why would I be New Brunswick? Why would I be Fredericton? I'm Canada. I'm Canadian. And bang, it just fit so well. And so now, like, and actually it fits so well that as Gare, we'll go back to Gare. I went to England and listened to him speak a few weeks ago. He's in London, England speaking. And he's telling the story of Canada's Huggable car dealer. Well, I'm going to tell you, those people, their eyes are open and their ears are moved towards them, because when you say the word Canada, it puts a lot out there. And then when you add Huggable to it, and we're a car dealer, so it blended, it worked, it sounded good, it fit, and that's what we are, Canada's Huggable car dealer. And we trademarked it. We did everything so that we wouldn't ever have a competition with it, and it just fit. And Canada's Huggable car dealer. And the best part is everybody can tell a story or heard about a car dealer, in a bad way. But most car dealers, like 98% of car dealers, are probably more honest than anybody you ever imagine. And yes, there are 2 or 3%, but politicians for most part are probably really good people, other than that 2 or 3%. So, when you go there and add Huggable to a car dealer, well, nobody expects, it doesn't, what fits in but doesn't belong. And the Wizard taught us that, right? When somebody tells you he's Canada's Huggable car dealer, well, yeah, the country Canada, that's nice. Huggable, yeah, that's really good. But geez, he's a car dealer, and it gives them brain freeze, right? Well, when you can brain freeze somebody, they never forget you. So it just all blends into the perfect elevator speech, the perfect logos, and the perfect story.
Well, it sounds as if you're having as much fun with it as you ever have, and eagerly, not necessarily anticipating, but certainly open to whatever the next bullet is to ride. But while you're hanging on for dear life, dear life to this one, is that somewhat accurate?
Well, yeah, like I love what I do, and I do what I love, and I'm very fortunate. And I'm very fortunate my daughter and son are taking over the mechanics and the day-to-day running of the business. My son buys all the vehicles. My daughter does all the management. So they're trying to put me out to pasture a bit. But in saying that, I get to do what I love right now, and that's doing the marketing parts of it and going around and meeting people and being the face of our business. So I'm loving it. Like I get up every day and I just feel so fortunate that I can get up and do what I'm doing. And I have some great family and some great employees that, even to be an employee at Wheels and Deals, like, this is going to sound crazy, but if you're not Huggable, we don't want you. Like I put an ad in the paper for salesmen last week or 2 weeks ago, and we probably had over 100 people apply. And I said, you just got to be nice. If you're nice and like people, we'll teach you the rest. Like, you don't have to know how to sell nothing, because if you're nice and you got a good product and you represent your product well, and your prices are competitive, like, nobody's going to pay you more because you're Huggable, but they're certainly going to come to your place to see what you're all about. You don't have to pull fast ones. You just got to be you, and we tell that right in the ad. That's what I told people. You just got to be, if you're a nice person and care about people, we'll teach you. If you don't care about people, don't even bother calling me. And that's what every place, even if you're washing cars at Wheels and Deals, we want nice people washing our cars. You come to work and you're not happy with your job, then we're not the place for you. Like, we want people that are Huggable, because I believe it's in today's society with social media, everybody's job, not just the owners no more, but everybody's job is 24/7. And, you got to be a nice person 3 o'clock on a Saturday morning and 3 o'clock on a Monday afternoon, because that's where we are now with our social media. So that's what we want. We want even if you're a customer and you're a real hard head, like there's a lot of other car lots you can go to and cause problems. We're looking for customers that appreciate being looked after and want a different experience and want to feel like they're part of a good experience.
Jim, the story is an excellent example, and I know we've only done sort of the 50,000-foot view, but there's a lot in here to reflect upon and consider, and I'm just thrilled that you've enjoyed telling it, and that you're still so much enjoying what you're doing. It's really my absolute pleasure to connect with you. I can't wait until I get to share your company when we both get to tell a little of our story from the same stage. And I want to really sincerely thank you for this time. It's been great, and I hope we get to have many more conversations. I suspect we will, and I hope so.
And Kevin, thank you.
You can connect with Jim online at www.wheelsanddeals.ca. So that's and spelled out all the way. A-N-D. Wheels and Deals, all one word, .ca. On Facebook, you can find them at facebook.com/Jim Gilbert's Wheels and Deals. Same handle on Instagram, instagram.com/Jim Gilbert's Wheels and Deals. It's simply at Wheels and Deals on Twitter, and there's a YouTube channel as well. If you go there and you search out Jim Gilbert's Wheels and Deals, you'll find their YouTube channel, and you can subscribe and see Troy's Huggable Tuesday and a whole bunch of other fun video stuff and get a bit of a window into what it's like out in Fredericton, New Brunswick, and what they're doing as Canada's Huggable car dealer. All those links are up on the show notes blog post for this podcast. This is episode 50. You can find that at noscheduleman.com. If you like this episode, I'm pretty sure you're going to like episode 10 with David Cicerelli. It's called Building a Global Business and Brand. David is the CEO of Voices.com, and he joined me almost a year ago from right now to tell me the whole story of how he built that from nothing, and along with his wife Stephanie, just taking one step at a time to becoming the global company and brand that it is now. Fascinating story. I think you'll also like episode 34 with Cole Perrin. Go with your gut, run your own race. Cole, as of this time anyway, is the crew chief for Martin Truex Jr., the Furniture Row Racing crew of the top level of NASCAR racing. And Cole has a terrific story of just picking up and leaving Ontario, Canada, and going down to North Carolina and knocking on doors and sleeping on his friend's couch and just figuring it out until he realized his dream. Episode 43 also, learn to do by doing. That's kind of like what Jim would say, riding the bullet, right? That's Doug Vincent, my good friend from Rotary International. He is a United Nations representative from Rotary and tells just some incredible stories about family business, about learning, and about contributing literally all over the world. That's episode 43. You can find those and all other archived episodes of the No Schedule Man podcast on iTunes or at noschedulemanpodcast.com. In the meantime, you can reach me at kevinbolmer.com, noscheduleman.com. I'll take you to the same place. All my social media channel links are up there, as is the sign up for the email list, and I'd love for you to keep in touch, and I do hope that you'll join me on this journey and add your voice to mine. I want to thank you again for taking the time to listen and to share part of your day with me and with Jim. I'm grateful. I hope to have you back with me next week as we explore another journey on the No Schedule Man podcast.
Just a little deja vu.